Allegheny Middle School, and Alderdice High School.
In a church in Pittsburgh, a funeral service that had family and friends saying goodbye to someone they loved, someone who died way too young, was interrupted when gunshots were heard outside the church building, and the gun sounds were coming closer into the church, a barrage of bullets ripping through the crowd of mourners from outside in. Everyone was scared.
We need to make sure that this never happens again, and we will be working around the clock to do whatever's necessary to apprehend those that did this heinous thing today.
This happened in broad daylight, in a church in Pittsburgh.
I don't know who did this, but whoever did this, let me tell you something. God gonna have his way with you, because there was no reason for this to happen today.
And the person they were burying was murdered just 13 days earlier. His name was James Hornezes Jr. He was just 20 years old.
Let's go! Yay! Yay! Where my pops at? Where my pops at? Yeah! Yeah! Hey, tell him, Jit! Tell him, Jit! Yeah!
Born and raised in Pittsburgh, this kid lived and breathed basketball. You'd find him on every court from the Pittsburgh Project to Urban Impact. I'm not gonna stand here and tell you John was perfect. He made choices. Some good, some that would cost him everything. He was still finding his way, navigating the uncertainty of adulthood, shouldering responsibility, trying to stay grounded in an environment that could be unpredictable and unforgiving. John dreamed of stability, not just for himself, but for his family and friends. He was a brother, a son, a young man with dreams and ambitions. Behind his quiet demeanor was someone who loved deeply and lived with purpose, even when life didn't make it easy. But October 15th, 2022 changed everything. Before we get too deep, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you find value in these discussions. That day started ordinary. John had gotten ready just like any other day. He'd arranged to meet up with two of his close friends at the Sunoco gas station on Cedar Avenue. Simple plans, really. They weren't doing anything out of the ordinary, just waiting for a bus, maybe deciding where to go next. As they stood there with no reason to feel unsafe, an SUV slowly passed by, an otherwise unremarkable moment that turned deadly in an instant. The surveillance cameras captured everything, and what they captured would leave 3 people dead. Without warning, gunfire erupted. John and his 2 companions suddenly raised their weapons and opened fire on the moving vehicle. The SUV was riddled with bullets as the trio unleashed a barrage of gunshots, seemingly without hesitation. But here's what they hadn't counted on. The occupants of the SUV were armed too, and they didn't hesitate to defend themselves. In a flash, gunfire was returned. The street transformed into a chaotic crossfire. Bullets flew in both directions as nearby witnesses scrambled for safety, ducking behind gas pumps and car doors. What began as a one-sided ambush had become a full-blown shootout. But the surveillance footage captured something even more heartbreaking. 2 innocent women who had simply been waiting for the bus nearby, Betty Jean Everett and Jacqueline Mihalik, collapsed to the ground, struck by bullets never meant for them.
My mother lived in the high-rise on the north side. She wasn't just standing at the bus stop. That was a place that she lived for 5 years. She was a resident in the area of the north side. So I'm heartbroken and my soul is empty.
That's Betty's family speaking. 5 years she'd been catching that bus. 5 years of routine ended by someone else's war. During the shootout, 20-year-old John Hornezes Jr. was fatally struck by a returned bullet from the SUV. Within moments, multiple 911 calls flooded dispatch. When officers arrived, they were met with the devastating sight of multiple injured individuals. First responders worked quickly, administering CPR, rushing them to the nearest hospital. But the injuries were too severe. Despite the efforts of trauma teams, Betty Jean Everett, Jacqueline Mihalik, and John were pronounced dead shortly after arrival. 3 lives gone in less than 30 seconds. And as investigators began piecing together this tragic puzzle, it became clear this wasn't some random act of violence. There was history here. Bad blood, the kind that gets people killed. Within days, they identified the shooters. 19-year-old Sharon Troutman, police called him a gang member, was one of the men believed to be inside that SUV. He gets charged with homicide in John's death. But here's where it gets really tragic. One of John's friends, Charles Hines, survived with a leg wound. He was standing with John shooting at the SUV, and the investigation showed that it was bullets from his gun that killed Betty Everett and Jacqueline Mihalik, those 2 innocent women at the bus stop. So now Hines is facing double homicide charges for their deaths. Think about that for a second. You're in a shootout trying to hit your target, and instead, you killed 2 people who had nothing to do with any of it. That's the reality of street violence. Bullets don't care about your intentions. You'd think after losing John in such a violent way, his family could at least bury him in peace. But that was never going to be the case. You see, John's family knew this war that got their son killed might not be over just yet. They knew that in situations like this, the violence doesn't always end with the first shooting. They were worried and scared, so they formally requested police protection for the funeral. And the police department actually agreed. 2 officers were assigned to be there. Remember that detail, because it would become very crucial to the events that happened next. October 28, 2022. Destiny of Faith Church on Brighton Road. Over 100 people show up to say goodbye to John. The service starts around 9:40 in the morning. For about an hour, everything's normal as a funeral for a 20-year-old can be. But across the street, something's happening. And this is where the surveillance footage becomes absolutely chilling. 2 figures dressed in all black, faces covered with balaclavas, are lurking near a restaurant. For 30 minutes, they're just watching, waiting. One's holding a handgun in plain sight. The other's got something hidden under his jacket.
Prosecutors say teens Hezekiah Nixon and Sean Davis are first seen dressed in all black outside a restaurant across the street from the church. For about 20 to 30 minutes, the 2 people appear to survey the area. And at one point, you see one holding a handgun and another hiding something under their clothes.
30 minutes. 30 minutes they're standing there, and nobody notices these guys. 2 people in ski masks with guns, just hanging around outside a church during a funeral. At 11:03 a.m. that morning, they made their move. They arrive in front of the church and start shooting, sending folks scrambling outside Destiny of Faith Church. The surveillance footage shows you exactly how calculated this was. These weren't random shots fired in anger. The gunman walked up and started shooting into the crowd of mourners. People who'd just spent the last hour crying over John's casket were now running for their lives. A man can be seen with a firearm firing directly into the crowd of running individuals with an obvious intent to kill. Watch the footage, and you see a woman get hit, fall, then still try to crawl to safety. You see people diving behind cars, some trying to get back inside the church, others just running in any direction that's away from the bullets. Inside the church, pure panic. The mourners, many already weeping from the emotional weight of the service, now found themselves trapped in a nightmare. Can you imagine? You're sitting in a pew, trying to process your grief. Then gunshots. loud, close, and you realize there's nowhere to go. Some people hit the floor, others scrambled under pews. Parents threw themselves over their children. Witnesses inside the church reported hearing more than a dozen gunshots.
This is senseless that you would come into or come around the church and shoot up.
I just think these young boys don't care about anybody's life, not even their own.
5 people got shot that day. 5 people who came to mourn, not to fight. Thank God they all survived. But we know the trauma of what happened at that funeral would be permanent. The shooters tried to escape, but surveillance footage tracked their black getaway car, camera by camera, street by street. They abandoned the car in Brighton Heights, but police found them stuck in traffic on the McKees Rocks Bridge. Perfect spot to be trapped, actually. Nowhere to run when you're on a bridge. 19-year-old Sean Davis and 16-year-old Hezekiah Nixon. When officers approached, one dropped his gun right there on the bridge. The other threw his weapon into the river below. Like that was going to make this all go away. They're now facing attempted homicide, aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, and firearms violations. Multiple counts of each. But here's the part that's going to make you furious. Remember when I told you John's family requested police protection for the funeral? Remember how I said officers were assigned? Well, here's the part that's going to make your blood boil. Those 2 officers, they went to the wrong location. Let that sink in for a moment. The family is terrified. They know something might happen. They specifically ask for help. The department says yes, assigns 2 officers, and then those officers show up at some other funeral home, find nothing happening there, and just leave. Meanwhile, across town, masked gunmen are loading their weapons outside the actual funeral.
11's Rick Earl joins us live. And Rick, I understand you just learned that the police officers that were requested by the church were not there.
Yeah, that's right, Lisa. Multiple family members here outside the hospital were telling me this afternoon that police officers were supposed to be at that funeral, but they say no one ever showed up. Now, I did speak with a law enforcement source just a short time ago. They confirmed that 2 Pittsburgh police officers were assigned to that detail, but those officers at the very last minute were pulled for another assignment. After completing that other assignment, those officers planned to return to the funeral, and that's when the shots were fired and the shooting broke out. Again, my source telling me it's not normal procedure for Pittsburgh police officers to attend these funerals, but they suspect there was somebody anticipating possible trouble at that site, and that's why those officers may have been requested in the first place. Again, those officers pulled for another assignment, and then they were going back to the church, and when they were on their way back, the shooting happened.
John's family remembers him as the kid who lived for basketball, who'd protect his friends, who tried to find his way in a world that didn't give him many good options. They remember his smile, his loyalty, that big heart everyone talks about. In neighborhoods where violence breeds violence, where disputes turn deadly in seconds, where even funerals aren't safe. How many more John Hornezes are we going to lose? How many more innocent bystanders, like Betty and Jacqueline, are going to die because they happen to be standing in the wrong spot? The heartbreaking loss of John James Hornezes Jr. serves as a haunting reminder of how quickly disputes can spiral into devastation and why real change is needed to prevent another life from being stolen before its time. This isn't just a story about one young man's death. It's about what happens when the systems meant to protect us fail. When violence becomes so normalized that shooting up a funeral seems like a reasonable response. John James Hornezes Jr. should be 22 years old right now. Maybe playing basketball somewhere. Maybe figuring out his next move. Instead, his story ended in a cascade of bullets that didn't stop even when they lowered him into the ground. And somewhere in Pittsburgh, another young man is standing on another corner, making choices that might lead to another funeral, another shooting, another cycle that won't end until we decide enough is enough. 3 lives lost, 8 people shot. A funeral turned into a war zone, and a police department that failed when it mattered most. That's the story of John James Hornezes Jr., a 20-year-old who deserved better than the world gave him, and whose death shows us just how broken our systems really are. I hope this story helps you recognize warning signs and encourage you to seek help or offer support before it's too late. I'll see you in the next episode of Crime of Passion. Thank you for watching.
In fact, that funeral was being held for a 20-year-old man who had been shot and killed in another mass shooting on the north side just 12 days ago.
Police believe some type of neighborhood feud is fueling this violence. Police say 6 people were hurt in this shooting. 1 person was in critical condition at Allegheny General Hospital but has been upgraded to stable. 5 others are also in stable condition. 1 of them was taken to Children's Hospital. KDKA's Andy Sheehan has been speaking with investigators and has the latest now on the investigation. Andy.
Christine, youth gun violence, kids with guns and ready to use them. It's become an epidemic in Pittsburgh and the region. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. Many times it involves rival groups, not organized gangs, but rival groups organized around turf or drugs that get into these disputes. There's a shooting incident, there's retaliation, and there's retaliation against that. This started 2 weeks ago with a shooting on the north side outside of Sunoco Station, in which this young man and 2 women victims, innocent bystanders, were killed. There appears to be a retaliatory action last night in the Spring Hill neighborhood, and now this shooting today outside of this young man's funeral. A funeral for the victim of gun violence, itself disrupted by gunfire. A burst of 5 rounds, followed by 15 more. In their wake, 6 people are wounded. Suspected mourners of 20-year-old John Hornezes, killed last week in a gun battle outside the Sunoco station on the north side. Commander, we believe this is related to the shooting outside the Sunoco station, the funeral for John Hornezes, the 20-year-old today.
It was his funeral that was taking place. As far as any of the relationships or what might have precipitated this shooting is still under investigation at this time.
Police now believe they have a turf war raging between rival groups that squared off that night at the Sunoco station. Police sources tell me those connected to the funeral victim fired shots at rivals last night in the Spring Hill neighborhood, and today may have been the latest retaliation in an escalating war. We're seeing some sort of turf battle, some sort of gang activity, neighborhood dispute?
So obviously we believe there's a dispute going on. We're looking into that. We're going to utilize all the resources as we have been doing currently, and we'll continue to do so. There will be a strong police presence in the areas of concern that we believe are problem areas, so that we can hopefully prevent anything further from happening at this time.
Last week's shooting shocked the city for taking the lives of 2 innocent women victims who had been waiting for a bus. Now police are alerting the public about this raging war. Are you concerned about, and will you warn the neighborhood here on the north side about an escalation after this?
Obviously, yeah. We need to get together and coordinate all of our efforts and all the information that we have, so that we, anything that needs to be put out, obviously we'll make sure that gets put out.
But these shootings tend to go on unabated. This is a danger not only to these kids, these people themselves, but to innocent bystanders. People that were mourning today at this funeral had nothing to do with this dispute between these neighborhood groups. Commander Richard Ford putting out a warning to the north side this evening.